AA-1025 or 1025, the Memoirs of an Anti-Apostle, Marie Carre. Publisher's note about this book. Marie Carre was a French nurse and a convert from Protestantism. In 1965, she died in Marseille, France in 1984. In May 1972, she had AA-1025 published by Editions Sergiev in Fresnes, France, under the title ES-25, which stands for Élève Séminariste 1025 or Seminary Student 1025. In 1973, the book was published in both French and English by Editions St. Raphael in Sherbrooke, Quebec, Canada, the English edition of which had been printed 7 times by 1988. According to the publisher at Editions St. Raphael, the story as she tells it is essentially true, and the way it happened. However, she did apparently do some slight editing of the text to make it more readable. Nonetheless, there is obviously a strong difference in style between Marie Carre's prologue and her interjected editorial comment on pages 94 to 98. On the one hand, and the text itself on the other, which is strong indication that the story was written by someone else. Also, there is evidence of authenticity in the memoirs themselves, which discuss a matter that did not take place until approximately 1980 to 1983, namely the adulation given to Martin Luther in various quarters in the church. This especially leading up to the 500th centennial of his birth in 1983. It is not reasonable to imagine that a nurse, or anyone else for that matter, could have predicted 1971 or 1972 that the various people in the Catholic Church would, within 10 years, be extolling Martin Luther as some sort of religious hero. Even if this book were pure fabrication from beginning to end, nonetheless what it claims to prognosticate has actually come true, unerringly so. Besides this, moreover, all the many profound and even revolutionary changes that have occurred within the Catholic Church since Vatican Council II, 1962 to 1965, had to have been conceived in the minds of people intimately familiar with the workings of the Catholic Church, and also has to have been promoted by such people through influential channels within the Church, or they would never have been accepted and put into place. AA-1025 makes profoundly thought-provoking reading today, when we in our time have seen virtually all the changes discussed in this book come to pass. Prologue. How must one begin to write a book when not a writer, or rather, how can one explain that he believes it is his duty to publish memoirs that are quite terrible, and precisely because they are so terribly disquieting? Then let us say that these pages are an appeal to Catholics of today in the form of a foreword, or rather a confession. Yes, a confession. In so far as poor little me is concerned, it seems to be the right word, although it is not one of those words which no one wishes to use today or nowadays. Well, when I say no one, I only wish to designate those who believe that they give proof of intelligence by conforming themselves to the ways of today, and even to the ways of the day after tomorrow. As for me, I find only one commonplace word to explain my own position. I will say that the ways of today, the ways of so-called meaning of history, have a taste of ashes to me. But Lord, you well know that I firmly believe that you are the strongest. Is it necessary to clarify this? Yes, in these present days. Yes, I believe it to be indispensable because people now put their confidence in the power of man, a power that can launch rockets, but allows people to die from hunger, a power that puts machines to work, but it is also their oppressed slave, a power that pretends to have no use for God, but knows how to trick people in discussing the creation of the world. I must stop talking. I must calm myself. All that proceeds so far is only destined by modesty, to delay the moment when I must introduce myself to the reader. Well, I am only a mere nurse, who has nevertheless seen many persons die, and who continues to believe in the mercy of God, and who has experienced how the will of the invisible God reveals itself at the right moment. I am only a nurse, and I saw in a country that I will not name, in a hospital that must remain anonymous. I saw a man die following an automobile accident, a man without a name, without a nationality, I mean without identification papers. Nevertheless, he had, in his briefcase, documents I was forced to examine. One of these documents began by these words: I am the man without a name, the man without a family, without a country, and without a heritage. Apparently, this text of about 100 typewritten pages could bring no clue allowing one to identify this injured man. But who knows? Moreover, let me be honest, and since I have spoken of confession, let me be completely honest about it. I already had decided to read these intimate notes, so I gave in quickly to this temptation. I could not foresee that by letting my feminine curiosity stifle my scruples as a nurse, that I should come upon a voracious document that would upset and overwhelm me. As this text was too serious to be simply thrown into the fire, too compelling to be entrusted into anybody's hands, or it seemed too truthful to me, especially to me, a former Protestant converted to the Holy Catholic and Everlasting Church, to the Holy Church in which only it is required to try to practice a small and great, but especially persevering holiness, that as all this seemed to be true, I could not avoid giving precedence to the defense of my holy church above all other considerations. Oh, I know very well that God does not need to be defended, that he has no need of me, but I also know that he could in the past have left me in error, in the sadness of unanswered questions, in the atmosphere of a supreme presumption, which, for example, has kept the Irish Catholics in ghettos for 4 centuries, where laws pretending to be legitimate and sacred act as a barbed wire offense. Not that I am Irish. Do not try to find out who I am. You will never do so. But the Irish, without being aware of it, have helped me to show some courage. At least may this humble testimony make up for what souls of great wisdom and of high standing forget to accomplish. But my injured patient was not Irish either. He seemed to be more or less a Slav. But this is not particularly important, since he could not speak. Nevertheless, I tried to get some information from him by asking him close to his eyelids every time he wished to answer in the affirmative. At that time, I had not yet read the document that he carried with him, but either he refused to answer my questions, or he did not have the strength to do so. How will I ever know? It is only after his death that I realized in reading the text that he must have suffered 1,000 times more in thinking of these hundreds of pages, that he should never have had the weakness of writing, than he suffered from his wounds and fractures. If I had only the immense power, the unbelievable importance of this man, reduced to the state of a broken puppet, I might have found the words that he needed to hear. I might have been able to destroy the armor that he had invented to shield his spite. Why not simply say his suffering? An armor even strengthened by years of work, can also be destroyed in the fraction of a second. God and the saints know this. But I was only occupied with my work as a nurse. No, this is not quite true. As for me, and that it is not to be found in my books, my courses, nor my examinations. Prayer is complementary to the medical care. And I prayed for this man who, I was told, possessed no identification papers. I gave him a name. I call him Michael, because this archangel often helped me. This Latin word Michael consoled me for having to listen in our new religious ceremonies, as noisy as our streets, our stadiums, and our radios, to all those new words to which was added the adjective vernacular to impress and silence us. For all this is comedy, all those speeches by which we are invited to participate as adults, while Christ called to himself little children, is but derision, trying to disguise some kind of ironical and cruel authoritativeness, but which is apt to turn against itself. Therefore, I prayed for that man, naming him Michael, and without suspecting that he was one of our worst enemies. Had I known it, my Christian duty would always have been to pray for him, to urge others to pray for him with an equal ardor. Now I had masses offered for him, but it is difficult to find masses to keep the absolute appearance of a thousandfold holy sacrifice that have not the pitiful aspect of a pleasant meal. Alas, thrice alas, Michael had an unforgettable look in his eyes, but one which I could not read. After having received knowledge of his confidences, I tried to revive in myself the power of that look in order to discover in it what he wished me to do with his memoirs. But first of all, why had he written them? Was there not in this a sign of real weakness? Maybe the only dangerous weakness to which he had given in. What was his aim? Was it one of domination or of consolation? Only God knows. Today, I met a girlfriend who wishes that this text be published. But have I a right to do this? My greatest sorrow consists in confirming that I could never wish to ask the questions that in confession, as I would have done some years ago. No, the very holy virtue of obedience is today the extremely powerful weapon that our enemies, who pretend to be our friends, make use of against what we wear, to put up in its stead what they have decided to have us become. In short, this word become can be described because it is known. It already has 4 centuries of existence, and it is called Protestantism. There it is. We are invited bit by bit, a little obedience by little obedience, from false humility to false remorse, from deceitful charity to deceptive ambiguity, from words disguised as a double-edged sword, of which yes is no, and no is yes. We are invited. I say to pretend to remain good Catholics all the while becoming perfect Protestants. This is a brilliant idea, but after all, someone had to think of it. Yes, such is the Christianity today that some pretend to make us love. But history teaches us who is the most patient, who is the strongest, and who is the most faithful. May Michael forgive me if I reveal his role, for it is for his good and ours also. Ad majorem Dei gloriam, to the greater honor and glory of God.